The last hustings, but in an even more vacuous form. Call Me Dave says, vote for change. That's really original, never heard that before. The great leader drones on about fairness, another concept you rarely hear about in elections. And Clegover's slogan is so long and complicated, even he has trouble remembering it. Is this traditional old-fashioned sort of politics really what's required in the 21st century? Don't the parties need something more original to appeal for our votes? Comedian, clever man, now a film writer too, David Baddiel, gives us his take of the week.
I have a motto for life, which is, the truth is always complex. And I think that is true. I think whenever you look at any kind of issue, you'll discover that a simple message won't cover it. There'll always be shades of grey, there'll always be qualifications, there'll always be ways of talking about it that can be seen from different points of view. The trouble is, I guess, that as we speak, in campaign rooms across the country, there'll be advisors speaking to the major politicians saying we've got to keep it simple, we've got to give out a broad, straight message that people can understand. And of course they're right about that in PR terms. That is the best way to get your message across. The trouble is the actual issues are not simple. Politics of necessity speaks in generalisations. A politician, especially a campaigning politician, has to say this is what Britain is, and they have to stand in front of montages which show a young person or a black person or a gay person, and as such they define Britain in those categories. And no one, I think, can be defined by category. For example, in the film that I've just made, which is about a Muslim man who discovered that he was actually born Jewish, I guess the film is about the complexities of identity, because this is a guy who's spent his whole life thinking he's one thing and then he discovers he's another, and then what he discovers perhaps is that neither of those things really define him as a human being. And in political terms, that relates to the way that politicians are always trying to fit people into categories, perhaps particularly ethnic minorities.
I don't know what I knew before, but now I know I want to win the war.
I mean, I feel for politicians in this respect because they're speaking to a very big room of politicians. They're speaking to the whole country. So really what we need is a kind of one-to-one thing. What I'm proposing is a nightmare vision where there's one politician for every one of us. The way we've been taught to think about politics in this country is in a very monolithic way. It's Labour or Conservative, really. It's right or left. And again, as time goes on and we change and the culture of this country changes, I don't think those things fit anymore.
David Baddiel in a cafe in Hampstead, to our little cafe here in Westminster. Welcome.
Hello.
In this ungodly hour.
It's so late, isn't it? Is the election over?
Not yet, but it just feels like that.
Yeah.
And I'm not telling you who won either.
Good.
Let me put you on the spot. What's the answer?
Well, it is really late, so I can't possibly answer that. And I was just making that stuff up on the spot, so I don't know. What I'm saying is it's an incredibly difficult issue. It's a double bind. As far as I can make out, if a politician is genuinely complex and does qualify a lot of issues, say Michael Foot seemed to me to be a very intellectual man, and part of the problem was that people thought he waffled on and that he didn't present a simple message, but he was clearly very clever and able to take in a lot of shades of grey. So I don't know what the answer is. The point is, I would agree that if I see a politician really trying to define every issue, then I'll think I'll get bored. But simple terms won't do it.
Do you think that your view is widely held in the public? Do they sense this too?
Well, I think that people sense that politics is changing. I do think that people think, you know, the issues aren't as clear-cut as they were and that the old models of right and left are not what they were. I mean, to take David Cameron as an example, you know, he is being portrayed by Labour as this toff and they're trying to get back to the idea that he's an old Tory. But the fact is, you know, he is green, he is interested in issues like disability, which you don't associate with Tories. He rides a bike. You know, he doesn't quite fit the mould, and no one quite fits the mould. That's the point. But politicians are always trying to make, especially their enemies, fit the mould.
Is it the two-party system that is under threat, or is it just that people are disillusioned with politics because of Iraq, the expensive scandals and so on?
I don't know the answer to that, but I was talking to Michael earlier, and he was talking about, in a hung parliament, if that is what happens, there will now be many more people who aren't Labour or Conservative or even Liberal Democrats than there were in, say, 1974, which was the last time we had a hung parliament. And that perhaps is indicative of the fact that people don't just want to stick to the old mould. They want to find other ways to express themselves along a kind of myriad political spectrum.
You must be hoping his analysis is right.
I think it is. I think one of the dilemmas we always face as a party, still do to a certain extent, if you look at the history, post-war history of Britain, it is, with a small L, a much more liberal society. But that has not, to the same extent, been translating into capital L liberal votes for the party that's got that name in its title. That's one of the dilemmas for us. But I think as society does become more amorphous, less deferential, more social mobility, well, at least for some, inevitably what you're saying is going to happen. I think that's healthy, obviously.
Diane, do you buy David's analysis?
No, I don't, because 'twas ever thus. The issues are always complex and slogans are always simple. In the run-up to the First World War, there was a big debate about wanting more arms, 8 dreadnoughts. What was the slogan? We want 8, we won't wait. Home rule for Ireland. The issues have always been complex. The slogans have always been simple. Stupidly simple slogans, which most of them are just that stupid. But sometimes a slogan, like Obama's slogans, really capture a mood and the zeitgeist.
What do you think, Michael?
Well, I think I do rather agree with Diane, but I'm very depressed. I think the election will be an insult to the intelligence of the electorate. No, you see that already. I mean, people know that there's a deficit. They know that there's some really serious issues, and they've already spotted that the election's set off with everyone promising, more public spending and less taxation, as though the whole question of how we're going to deal with the deficit is going to be postponed until after the election is over. I mean, the Conservatives, who a few months ago were talking about austerity, are now talking about optimism and hope.
Yes. This is very much Mr Cameron's message compared to the age of austerity at the Osborne speech in the party conference.
But to be balanced about it, I mean, I was watching Gordon Brown today, and he says, the Tories are proposing a cut in national insurance. No, actually, they're proposing not to increase national insurance in the way that you are. He's talking about paying down the deficit. No, actually, what he means is we're going to be borrowing much more money next year and the year after and the year after that, not paying down the deficit at all.
I mean, in a sense, you should be a little encouraged in that there is at least a chance, I put it no higher than that, but it may be quite a good chance that we'll end up in a hung parliament, and that may see the unravelling of the system that you suggest is
it might do, but I guess
past its sell-by date.
Perhaps,